Hi, everyone, and thank you for attending our presentation today. My name is Samantha McAleese, and I am a Research and Evaluation Associate at MediaSmarts, and I'm here with our Director of Research, Dr. Kara Brisson-Boivin. And I'm joining you from unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory, and Kara is joining from the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations in Ontario, Canada. MediaSmarts is a Canadian not-for-profit charitable organization for digital and media literacy. Our vision is that people have the critical thinking skills to engage with media as active and informed digital citizens, and we achieve this through education, public awareness, and research and policy work. Today we're here to talk about our research and policy work, specifically how it engages with youth across Canada. MediaSmart's most notable research project is Young Canadians in a Wireless World. And through this project, we've surveyed over 20,000 parents, teachers, and students since 1999. And we're continuing the fourth phase of this project in 2021. We've also conducted several qualitative research projects on topics like online resiliency, online privacy and consent, online hate, online bullying, and digital well-being. Since 2020, MediaSmarts has published 2 reports documenting conversations with young Canadians about privacy online. Both of these projects were funded by the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada. This research counters the stereotype youth do not care about privacy or cybersecurity and offers solutions that policymakers should consider in the review of Canada's privacy laws. First report, Young Canadians Speak Out, focused on online privacy and consent. Previous research tells us that the presence of privacy policies online does not always correlate with a better understanding of a platform's information practices. This, alongside the fact that most of us click I agree without carefully reading privacy and consent documents, is what some have referred to as the biggest lie on the internet. Additionally, while children and youth are concerned about privacy online, and want to make informed choices about the information, data, and content they share, scrolling through pages and pages of long and boring text is not a sufficient or meaningful way to make such choices. Currently, most terms of service documents are literally designed to discourage you from reading them and offer far more protections to businesses and platforms, not to customers or users. This is particularly concerning as we learn more about how our data profiles are increasingly mobilized and monetized by various data brokers in ways which can have an impact on many aspects of our lives for years after the data is collected. Finally, while youth do care about online privacy, they conceptualize it in a way that is different from adults, and in particular, ways that do not fit with many online platforms. These findings from previous research and the literature helped shape this research for the project and guided conversations and interactive activities about online privacy and consent with youth in Ottawa. So in fall 2019, we hosted 3 focus groups with youth ages 13 to 16, and we recruited youth through our community partners and through local youth networks and organizations. As part of the focus groups, participants were asked to share their thoughts on and experiences with current online consent practices. Following the discussion, they were asked to come up with a hand-drawn paper prototype of their ideal terms of service and consent policies. So in talking with youth about online privacy and consent, what we found was that they want a much clearer understanding of the terms of service and privacy policies that they are agreeing to. I also want to understand how the data economy works and how the platforms they use could affect their future. For youth, there is a fine line between legitimate data collection and uses that they describe as weird or creepy. This includes being virtually followed through GPS or receiving friend recommendations based on where they have been. Beyond that, youth to whom we spoke felt it wasn't enough to just be informed on how these legal documents worked. We wanted platforms to take certain steps to make the information clear and simple. We wanted the platforms to verify that users genuinely understand what they're agreeing to, and to allow users who change their mind to revisit their decisions, and to give them more control over what is being collected. At the heart of this research project was an opportunity for youth to design consent processes in a way that made sense to them. The paper prototypes they created expressed in a concrete way the best practices they had identified, such as being able to change a yes to a no at any given time if they were no longer comfortable with a feature. Prototypes also included features for easily accessing their application settings and swiping a button to be able to revoke consent. Nearly all of the participants' prototypes included more options than a single I accept button at the end of a long document. For young people, meaningful consent means not just giving a blanket yes or no, but being able to pick and choose what they are comfortable with on an ongoing basis. Participants did recognize that they would need to consent to certain required settings, such as giving access to their camera in order to use a photo sharing app. They accepted that these needed to be mandatory, felt that other permissions should be optional. It was also important to them that privacy and consent choices be presented in a clear, modular layout so that they could make informed decisions about what they were accepting. Finally, youth participants felt they were often pressured to accept terms and conditions because they had already invested time into downloading and installing an application. So they suggested having the terms presented before downloading an app and adding reading checkpoints that the readers would have to acknowledge before continuing to scroll through the text. Overall, this research project demonstrates that when youth are given the time and space to think critically about online privacy and to collaborate with one another, they are capable of generating comprehensive solutions to the digital issues they experience every day.
Okay, and so the second study that we're going to speak to you about today is our most recent research project around, called Algorithmic Awareness. And this project combined game-based learning with discussion to gain insight into how young Canadians understand the relationship between artificial intelligence or AI, algorithms, privacy, and data protection. Insufficient knowledge of AI and algorithms contributes to exclusion from online spaces, tech-facilitated discrimination, exposure to harmful content, and various privacy risks. The Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada reminds us that every day there are new creative ideas on how businesses can derive more profit from our personal information. And it is becoming increasingly difficult for individuals to demystify complex business relationships and complicated algorithms to make informed choices. This is especially true of children and youth who are often the target for new AI and algorithmic-based technologies, apps, games, and platforms. So this research project aimed to create the space for young people to reflect on how they interact with artificial intelligence in their everyday lives, to learn more about how AI and algorithms work, to understand the implications of AI and algorithms for their privacy, to inform new tools and resources to educate themselves and their peers about the relationships between AI and privacy, and to share all of these insights with academics, policymakers, and representatives from the education and technological sectors. So from November 2020 to January 2021, we conducted 8 focus groups with 22 young people ages 13 to 17. Participants were recruited via social media, and focus groups were conducted on a combination of Zoom and Roll20, which is a bit of a departure from our usual process of doing things in person due to the COVID-19 pandemic. These groups allowed participants to reflect on how they interact with artificial intelligence and algorithms in their lives and what they understood about the implications of AI and algorithms on their privacy and data security. So the interactive and scaffolded focus group format of introduction, then gameplay, followed by discussion proved to be a really generative approach specifically for research on sort of complicated technological subject matter like algorithms, AI, and privacy. Just going to provide you a little bit more detail on the game prototype designed for this game. We called the game #4U. It was designed by MediaSmarts education staff. It's a card-based pattern matching game that helps youth understand the role that algorithms play in their online and offline lives and the value of their personal information to the companies that use algorithms. The game primarily focused on recommendation algorithms because this is the variety that young people encounter most frequently, but players also learned about other forms of sorting and predictive algorithms as well. The game was designed to be played collaboratively with several players representing video or content makers and one player representing the platform. As I said, it was played over 3 phases. So the first phase, which we called the popularity phase, is where players try to solve the platform's algorithm to get their video as widely viewed as possible. In the second phase, the advertising phase, players drew on user data to solve the algorithm to get their advertisement seen by the right audience. And finally, in the machine learning phase, players repeat the gameplay of the advertising phase with the addition of proxy data and data brokerage. At the beginning of each phase, we would introduce players to different terms, concepts, sort of ideas or processes such as recommendation algorithms or proxies or personal information. And then this real-time learning was coupled with discussion questions in between each round of gameplay. And this really allowed participants to reflect on their own experiences with algorithms and artificial intelligence and to think more intently about the privacy implications of these processes. And so some key findings from this research, participants highlighted what they saw as a concerning tension that while their connected devices had the potential to provide them with the world at their fingertips, algorithms often narrowed the types of content that they were seeing. And youth were concerned about content saturation, meaning seeing too much of the same thing. And in particular, they were worried about how content saturation could contribute to a false sense of social consensus. Young people were aware of the impacts of algorithms in their online environments, and they were often frustrated by a sense of powerlessness in their ability to change these algorithmic architectures. Youth were acutely aware of the value of their personal data for online businesses, and especially since, as Nathaniel, a 16-year-old participant from the study, told us, everything boils down to advertising. While most participants had few reservations about the use of their personal information by algorithms recommending entertainment or leisure content, they were concerned about creepy or invasive corporate surveillance strategies. Young people disliked the idea that their online information was being lumped into categories of aggregate data to train algorithms without their knowledge or their consent. And participants strongly disliked data brokering, which they felt was scummy, unfair, wrong, or unethical. Many youth were not aware of proxy data and how things like race, gender, sexual orientation, or health status could be inferred from other data and used to build more complete data profiles. And then of course, those are mobilized by online businesses. And after learning about those machine learning processes, participants would describe them as, quote, kind of weird, creepy, strange, disappointing, and even evil. Finally, there was an acknowledgement from participants that algorithmic systems should not be left to their own devices, and they called for developers and platforms to be more aware of the consequences of relying too heavily on this technology. So young people have important and innovative solutions to the privacy and data security issues they encounter online. These solutions are directed at developers, online businesses and platforms, policymakers, governments, and individual users. We've combined the recommendations from both the research study that Samantha was speaking to on privacy and consent and this one, this current one on algorithmic awareness, into what we were calling a privacy pact, where PACT stands for Protection, Awareness, Control, and Transparency. And I'll provide a couple highlights within each of those key points. So for protection, youth want to see safeguards and be safeguarded from the unanticipated consequences of data collection and sharing practices. They want more robust data erasure policies that will give users the right to be forgotten, and clear and accessible privacy policies that allow users to give meaningful consent. Under awareness, they want more digital and algorithmic literacy education to foster critical thinking and empower users to take control over their personal information. A knowledge of how algorithms work, the uses and misuses of data, and how to protect their digital identity. An understanding of how sorting and recommendation algorithms determine what users see online. Under control, more control for users over what data is collected and how it is used, to turn algorithmic content recommendation off by default, more reporting features to flag harmful content, stronger and more meaningful consent processes, and finally, transparency, more information about how data is collected, stored, and brokered, clear explanations for algorithmic content recommendations, more information about algorithmic designs and defaults, and safety, privacy, and equity at the forefront of AI development. This Privacy Pact acknowledges the concerns of users and the roles and responsibilities of platforms and policymakers, emphasizing protection, awareness, control, and transparency will lead to meaningful and mutual solutions to online privacy and security issues. This pact mobilizes young Canadians' concerns about privacy and security and informs action for users, platforms, and governments. And finally, we wanted to take a moment to speak a little bit about our approach, about some next steps for us at MediaSmarts, and most importantly, about how we're sort of mobilizing these findings and how we would invite others to, to consider youth as experts in their own lives, particularly when it comes to online privacy and security. At MediaSmarts, we understand youth as a distinct social group, and with it an understanding that they have a role in social change as drivers of new behaviors and understandings. Through our research projects, we aim to create the space where young people are consulted as experts who can share their experience and concerns as they relate to the online world, digital technology, digital citizenship, and digital literacy. Researchers, policymakers, and platforms ought to continue to create these spaces and opportunities to engage with youth about online privacy and consent. At MediaSmarts, we will continue to do so to develop new resources, tools, and supports that best address young people's experiences and concerns, and we encourage others to do the same. Participants in our study tell us all of our studies tell us time and time again how much they appreciate the time, the space, and the opportunity to talk about these issues more intentionally, especially because they so directly impact their everyday lives. And they're energized by the idea that the findings in these studies are mobilized and shared in spaces where, unfortunately, youth are very rarely included. So apart from our usual routine of publishing a research report and sharing it on our website and our social media, we've had opportunities to mobilize findings from these projects with both the Canadian provinces of British Columbia and Ontario, who are reviewing their provincial privacy legislation, as well as in a submission to the United Nations regarding children's rights in the digital environment. We've commented on proposed changes to PIPEDA, to the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act here in Canada, with a specific focus on the concerns of youth regarding ever-changing and evolving context of tech design, for example, increased reliance on AI, and the need for more robust data erasure policies that will give users the right to be forgotten. These opportunities to consult on privacy legislation allow us to bridge the gap between youth in the spaces and places where their voices must be heard, especially when it comes to media and digital literacy policy development. Youth bring a lot to the table, especially when it comes to digital technology, privacy, and security. And their vision, innovation, creativity, and enthusiasm should be recognized by those in decision-making positions. Thanks very much for attending this presentation and for listening to our presentation today. We invite you to visit our website, mediasmarts.ca, to see more information on these projects and others that the projects we've spoken to today, as well as others. You can find the reports, infographics, and other further project information on our website. So thank you.